Hello, guys. I wanted to share my thoughts today on something that I heard recently, a saying, and it was, I believe, that grief needs a witness. And it struck a chord with me immediately. And then talking to a friend a little bit today who's been grieving for a couple years now made me really want to dive in and think about it a little bit more. And I just think it's so incredibly true. And it doesn't have to be grief over losing someone, although I do believe that that is one of, if not the most difficult forms of grief to bear in your lifetime. And I actually have not lost anyone extremely close to me. I haven't lost a partner, a spouse, a best friend, or anything, or a child. And I think just like when you're grieving over and mourning over the loss of a loved one, and you really need people to understand, and you need people to be there to remember your loved one and to understand your pain, I think that one's pretty normal. But there are circumstances and situations where it's not always easy for people to understand what you're personally going through if it was somebody incredibly close to you. And I think in that case, it's so important to find your tribe and find people who have been in your shoes in similar situations. Nobody will ever understand exactly how you feel or exactly what you've been through losing your loved one. But I just think it's so important to find people who can understand, and to find your tribe, to find people who think like you, and to find other people who are in various stages of healing and people who have healed a lot. They can be honest with you. They can share their victories, they can share their pain, and you can be in it together, you know? So however it is that you need to go about finding those people, I just think it's really important. And also, there are lots of different kinds of grief. For me, I ended up having to mourn my childhood. Everything became such a blur, and I couldn't remember most of my childhood because the domino effect of chronic illness from early childhood left me foggy-brained and dissociative. So I was focusing so much on getting better physically over the last several years that I didn't even think about my childhood, which is ironic because that's what I needed to heal was childhood trauma in order to heal myself physically. But what I found is that it's so easy for those of us who haven't been, like I haven't lost someone close to me, and it's easy for me to say, be happy, feel better now because your loved one would want that for you. Although I think that's true. Obviously your loved one on the other side wants you to be happy again and be joyful. But I found myself saying things like that and kind of like running my mouth with the spiritual talk, which can be really helpful. But if somebody's not ready to hear it, or if somebody feels like I can't relate to them, why are they going to listen to me? I wouldn't. So the people that I ended up reaching out to, or people that have been, have a history of abuse and PTSD and have a history of chronic illness and addiction, those are the resources that ended up being incredibly helpful for me. And those are the people, obviously, that I'm going to most relate to and want to listen to. But I needed my loved ones also. I needed my husband to bear witness to my incredible grief. I needed my friends to understand, to some degree, even though thankfully they couldn't understand and they can't understand. I did need that. I needed for people to know what I've been through. And I think it's a littles thing. My little Megs, my inner children needed people to understand, including me. They needed me to understand that the reason that the trauma led to addictions and stuff and led to this and that is because of the incredible pain that they experienced for years and years and years. Also, if you have an illness, if you have cancer, if you have a chronic illness, especially chronic illnesses where oftentimes they're invisible, so people on the outside can't see how much you're suffering because you might look pretty normal on the outside. I remember, I did not like being emaciated, 80 pounds and skin and bones and all that, but it wasn't until I got to that point that people really understood how much I was suffering. So I'll admit, it was almost a relief for people to be able to just look at me and say, she's in pain, rather than looking perfectly fine on the outside and suffering so much internally. So now, thankfully, I've healed in every way. I'm still working on stuff. It doesn't go away overnight, but the whole point of this video, let yourself grieve and try to find people who can understand what you're going through. And I think even though there are different kinds of grief, sometimes my form of grief I can still relate to your mourning process just not exactly the same. So just find somebody who understands, who you feel comfortable with, and just open yourself up if you can. I think it's just so important to not be ashamed of how you feel, not be ashamed of how long it's taking, not be ashamed of setbacks and triggers and all that stuff, because it's just life, and it's okay. So grief needs a witness. I think it's true. I think it's absolutely okay, and I think it's wonderful to be aware of. So whatever you're going through, find somebody who can relate and chat it up. I love you guys. Have a great rest of the day.